Let's take a closer look at the Andor series TVC figure of the Aldhani Mission version of Cassian Andor.
Villa Varykino, living the Star Wars life.
Hello there, and thanks for visiting the Villa Varykino YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be taking a closer look at and unboxing the Andor series Aldhani Mission version of Cassian Andor from the Vintage Collection line of 3.75 figures. This was a little bit of a hard one for us to find. Unfortunately, it didn't hit the retail store shelves from our usual Hasbro Star Wars stockists, so we had to source this one from an independent retailer that is really helping out the local community and sourcing some of these harder to find figures for those of us in New Zealand that just really want to add them to our collection. So had to wait a little bit longer to get our hands on this one, but we're very excited. There are just not that many TVC figures from the Andor live action series, which I think is a shame. There are so many characters that I really want to add to my 3.75 inch action figure collection. People like Deirdre Mero, Mon Mothma, Luthen Rael. I really need all of these characters for my collection. Some of them are available in the larger scale Black Series line, but you know, the 4-inch sort of scale is the OG, and that is where my heart really lies most of the time. So very excited to have another variant of Cassian here. Of course, he is the hero character. The series is named after him. At least we have another version of him in this line. So before I take this one off the backing card, I'm just going to take a closer look at the packaging. Of course, we have the classic Vintage Collection style backing card here. We have this really cool promo shot of Cassian here in his Imperial disguise. So we have a Imperial blaster, raised, classic Imperial hat, and the sort of different outfit that he has here. It's not quite Imperial officer. We've got some armored components, so it's sort of a fun variant here. We don't really have many figures of even Imperials wearing this outfit, so I'm really keen to look at all those details. We have a blue color behind the figure, and for the nameplate you can see it says Cassian Andor, Aldhani Mission. And we've got that bright red Andor series logo there. Very cool. Such a shame I never saw this one on store shelves. Definitely catches the eye. So on the back we can see some of the other figures from this wave. Admiral Piet, Hunter from the Bad Batch, Cassian Andor Aldhani Mission, Clone Trooper Phase 2 Armor, Cassian Andor in a different version of his outfit, Valsather, Cal Kestis, and Starkiller Vader's apprentice. So this version of Cassian Andor, the Aldhani Mission, is VC267 up there. And of course we just get that wall of text in different languages and things like that. So very cool. So happy to have him in our collection. So let's carefully remove that bubble and take a closer look at the figure. Okay, so now we have the figure out of the packaging, and one of the first things you might notice is his hat is off. So this one kind of got stuck in the packaging as I was taking him out, and it sort of pops off very easily. It's very squishy, so I could kind of see why it didn't really sort of stick to his head that well. So I'll take a look at the accessories in a moment, but yes, first let's take a look at this figure. So you might be able to see his hair is perhaps a little bit flat at the top. It's very close to the sides of his head, obviously, because we have that thin little Imperial officer hat that's got to fit on over the top. So it's one of those ones where I think it's kind of, you know, sometimes you kind of have the best of both worlds, like Stormtrooper helmets and that, you know, if they're going to go over the head, then sometimes you end up with either a small head or a bit of a bobble head. So I think for this one, they have gone with slightly flatter hair, so the hat fits on over, because that is how he is pictured on the backing card, even though it is technically removable. So first up, he's got pretty good face paint, really. There's like this really subtle shading of facial hair around his jawline that is really interesting. You don't see that much on Star Wars characters and Star Wars figures, so I was really quite intrigued to get a closer look at that once I got him out of the bubble. It's really quite interesting. The hair appears to be sculpted as part of the head, There isn't like a join or anything here. So it's all sculpted pretty close in to the head and painted fairly neatly. I don't see too much sort of overspill. There's perhaps a little tiny bit here that still has the flesh tone, but it doesn't. Sometimes it's perhaps a little less distracting when it's the paler color rather than like a dark strong color that's kind of gone over the lines like the hair color. But overall the hair looks like it's painted in a single brown tone. I don't see any kind of detail there, but it's not like he has highlights or anything in his hair. So we've got a really sort of interesting and unique to Andor, the series, Imperial sort of outfit here. It's not even sort of a standard tunic. We have some sort of interesting pockets and things like that. We've got armor on it that's giving me sort of General Veers kind of vibes, you know, sort of a higher ranking Imperial, but with armored components over the top. So, and we've got these boots, which are giving me very much Rogue One vibes. I think they did a really good job of matching the costume design of the show to the Rogue One film. It's supposed to be all kind of coordinating and feel very much the same. So I'm really liking the detail of this costume here. I can see some of the fine paint work here. We've got little buttons and things, the silver belt buckle here, and the boxes also painted in silver. Not too much in the way of different paint details here on the back. The armor components are pretty much flat gray against that sort of olive green tunic there. Black gloves. The interesting part about the sort of paint job on the lower legs is kind of the sort of duty boots. We can see that they have kind of been, it's sort of like an airbrush painting up that shin armor there. I quite like that. It sort of ties it in with those boots there. But overall, there isn't sort of weathering or any kind of battle damage here that I can see. We've got maybe 2 lines on the shoulders. Sort of a little bit of weathering there in the sculpt. There's sort of on both sides, there's just a small sort of little detail line there on the shoulders. But apart from that, I don't see much else. Obviously not, you're not going to have sort of weathering on the fabric components. And we have quite a large holster here that is actually sculpted as part of the tunic section here. If I flex the tunic, that is all just stuck on it. It is not separate. So the belt is kind of sculpted on as part of that lower part of his tunic there. And we have some flap parts. We can see this is a bit more of a rubbery plastic. So that should help us pose those legs. And then we've got the splits at the sides as well there, which should really help. One of the things I notice as I'm holding him, he moves very easily through that sort of mid upper torso section there. He's a bit clicky too, so we should be able to get some good posing here. So his head moves very freely. So we can get some sort of interesting head movement there. So I'm curious to see how I can move his arms, because this shoulder armor here is tucked in really tightly to the straps of the chest piece. So I'm not really sure. Okay. It's kind of really, it's a snug fit, but it does just fit under. And that's about as high as I can get his arms up on that side. Oh, that's tight. That's about as high as I'm going to get him on the other side. So not quite all the way, because that is actually tucking in under the shoulder piece there. And yeah, so that does obstruct the movement in that direction a little bit. We've still got pretty good movement in other directions. So nice easy elbows. Always good when there is like a blaster or something to hold. I could see him holding like a two-handed weapon very easily. He only comes with a single sort of handled weapon, so we'll test that out shortly. And pretty classic little wrist joins there. we've got that very easy to move midsection. You can go all the way around. So up under his skirt, we can see we've got pretty standard hip joins, and we also have, he kind of wants to rotate there, but we've got that upper thigh seam there as well. So if I can hold his top leg, we can get a little bit of a rotation there as well. And I like the fact that the knee joints are very well hidden by that sort of upper knee section of his shin armor there. So you almost can't see it. There's like the tiniest little hint of the joint in the back, but it's nice and hidden there. So the back of his armor is going to hit the sort of sculpted fabric on the back of his pants. I can't actually bend that back further than there. So we might get a little bit of that kind of pose, but I can't, that part of his leg is not going to go back any further, which is kind of interesting. I was wondering about that because I can only see a very small section of that hinge. So that's as far back as his knees are going to go. It's kind of interesting. And then we've got not much in the way of movement at the feet, certainly not forward, because again that shin armor is pressing on the shoes, but we can go just a little bit back, but mostly just side to side on this one. I don't get much else because that armor is really close down to his boots. I can get a little bit better on that one, but not a lot because it's kind of really hitting in all those different articulation points. So because of this overlapping over his thigh, I don't think we're going to get a lot of sort of interesting poses with his legs, which is fine for me. I generally have my figures on a clear base, so they're generally standing upright on my shelf. But for people that like to do, you know, artistic toy photography or just sort of posing them in interesting action poses, perhaps kneeling to target around a corner or something like that, you're going to be a little bit more hampered with him. But I do feel, particularly for the vintage collection line, Hasbro tries to, and I'm just speaking from what I can see from these figures, I feel like they do prioritize the sculpting and trying to put in details rather than posability. I feel like we know that they cut some corners sometimes when it comes to accuracy. We all know that Black Chrysanthemum sort of mix up there, shall we say, where they eventually redid it because that first one was not good. But generally speaking, I think for this one, they have decided to go with costume details rather than a full range of motion. So overall, I'm happy. He's just very flexible through that midsection. On the back, it's actually impressive how very little of the sort of articulation I can actually see. It's kind of interesting. Just a tiny bit at the elbows and behind the knees. The rest of it's kind of really well hidden. And I like the detail on that back armor plate there. It's not accented with any paint, but there's just some really nice fine detail there on the back. I think that was quite nice. Got the little, just sort of little silver buckles, just the right amount of sort of painting detail there on the front. So let's take a closer look at some of these tiny little accessories. We have his matching little olive green Imperial Officer hat with that little silver dome detail that is present on all of the Imperial hats there. Nice and tidy. Same sort of plastic on the inside. Very, very squishy. So let's see how well this is just going to sit on. So it sits on very loosely. I thought I might need to like sort of push it down. It just kind of sits on very easily. And it doesn't, I get the feeling this is the sort of thing that you might accidentally knock off on a shelf because it just kind of sits on his head. It doesn't grip, which is kind of interesting. I thought it would kind of, I know it's not going to sit down any further than it does on the show, but it's interesting that it doesn't actually sort of grip as much as I thought it would. But I feel like it looks good. It doesn't look too much like a bobble on his head. It's an interesting choice that they kind of made it removable rather than just sort of have it as a sort of glued on component like hair or something. But there we go. So you've got that as a sort of a little variant if you want to pose them without them on. And then we have the tiny little blaster here, all in black. I'm going to test it in the holster first. I'm just going to take that hat off because I know I'm going to drop it. It's just going to come flying off. So, okay, so we've just got this sort of black box holster on the side. It has a split at the bottom. You can see that. So I'm going to see how well this is going to fit in. And I don't know if this, I think the top scope might have to go outside. Okay, so I'm going to try and put it in like this. And it's a tight fit. Tight fit. Can I get that in there anymore? I think that's about as far in as mine wants to go because of that, sort of the grip there stops there. It's not too bad. Feels a little bit like this top scope is kind of splaying out just a tiny bit. But overall, I think that fits in there rather neatly. And certainly when viewed from the front, it doesn't look like that's sticking out too much. That looks pretty cool. Okay, so now the test that I'm always really curious about is how well, if I can get this back out, yeah, I have to say that scope does have a fair amount of bend to it. So I personally don't think I'm going to store mine in that holster. I don't want to like give that a bit of a permanent bend because the whole, if I put the Cassian down, the whole blaster can kind of bend. It's a bit rubbery. So perhaps that'll make it easier to put it in his hand. Let's have a look. I do like accessories that can fit in the character's hands fairly well. Because this is rubbery, that kind of went in fairly easily. He does have quite an extended trigger finger, so I had to kind of just wriggle that one in there. But overall, I think that went in pretty well, and I think that looks good. His finger goes in the right spot. So if I can just do a little bit of a pose with him. There we go. Get his hat back on. It's funny how loose that feels. So there we go. Cassian has his accessories and he's all dressed up like he is on the backing card picture. So there. I know that the sort of Imperial officers in, you know, Star Wars history of action figure collecting tend to be the less interesting ones, shall we say. They're kind of wearing just grey suits. They're less actiony. They don't come with, you know, big blasters or lightsabers. So they do tend to be the ones that sit around on store shelves a little bit. But because this is Cassian in disguise, I think this was a really fun choice. I do want some of the Imperials from this show. Because they were such important characters and we did see so much of the Galactic Empire in that series. I do really want some of those Imperial characters, but I like that we've got Cassian in his Imperial disguise. I will say his legs are kind of splayed a little. He's kind of a little bit wide-legged, and when I squeeze them kind of in, I'm going to have to do just a little bit of sort of adjusting. See, maybe if I can... They're kind of splayed at the hips. And if I sort of do the rotation, it just kind of makes him look a little bit like his toes are turned in too much. So that's kind of an interesting pose. His feet aren't close together. And I don't think he's really going to hold if I try and pinch him in a little bit. So that's a little bit interesting. So, despite the fact that he is in Imperial disguise, he's a little bit more actiony. He's got armor, he's got a weapon. And he's clearly, you know, can tromp around in the mud with those muddy boots. I think that looks really cool. Yeah, really happy to have this one in our collection. Now, they really need to release more Andor series of characters in the Vintage Collection line. There are so few of them, I don't even really have a spot for them on my shelf yet. I generally wait until I've got at least a few of them to build like a little bit of a scene so I can figure out how much space to give them on my shelf. And there's just a handful of them. It's really disappointing, especially since Andor aired a little while ago. You think they'd have some more out by now, so perhaps they're just a little slow through the pipeline. I definitely need more for my Andor collection. Who knows, maybe they'll release a bunch when the next series of Andor starts airing so that we can get some more figures for our collection. But there you go. I'm really happy, especially with that sort of the facial hair shading. Thought that was really fun. Cassian's not really a clean shaven guy, so that's really quite, I like just that subtle shaving. It's just, it's so fine, the gradient, it doesn't look obvious where it starts and stops. I think that's really good. And he is one of those characters that I think they do capture the likeness pretty well of Diego Luna. I think they do really capture his likeness in the figures quite well. So I'm very happy. This does look like Cassian in Imperial disguise for my shelf. I don't think I'd mix him up accidentally with some of my other modern Imperial characters. So there you go. That was the Aldhani Mission variant of Cassian Andor from Hasbro's The Vintage Collection from the Andor live action series from Disney+. I'm really happy. I think those legs could potentially be a little closer together. Perhaps they wanted to give him more of an action stance, or maybe that is just the quirkiness of my specific figure. Sometimes you get a little bit of variability with those joins and the way that your figure comes together. But either way, I like the details. I like his face sculpt, and the fact that the hat doesn't actually look too bad all together there. Very cool. He's definitely going to be in my tiny little Andor series spot in my vintage collection display. Here's hoping they release more for us soon. I need Mon Mothma. I need all those fabulous characters, and you know, more from the next series. They better give us more. So thank you so much for watching my unboxing and mini review of this Aldhani Mission variant of Cassian Andor. I think he's really cool. Do check out our other videos for more Star Wars unboxings, including Black Series, TVC, Funko, and lots more. Catch you in the next video, and as always, may the Force be with you.
If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, check out our other videos, and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.